tonight's hobby enhancement has been sitting around collecting dust for so long it's probably more like 14 or 15 years old. Right, well, recently I just polished off 6,000 points worth of Dark Elves, so must be time to start a new army. This time we're fielding Tzeentch. Some people call Zenich. I have no fucking idea what the correct pronunciation is, and I don't care. I'm going to call mine Tzeentch. This army, like the Dark Elves, is pretty much entirely second hand. Even the bits that are still on sprue, like those, and even the stuff that came in boxes, even these came second hand with some bundle of stuff that I found somewhere along the line. But this being a Tzeentch army, I'm actually lying. The Greater Demon, I bought that new, but with dollars that I got from selling some other second-hand miniatures. Honest. Now this particular army was not originally intended. What happened is that in some trades to acquire some other stuff, I stumbled across some metal, if I can get them into focus, some metal horrors, about 45 of the buggers, and I thought, well, there's some other stuff that I want to do, I want to collect, so I'll sell those and that will fund the next army that I'm looking to buy. So I'll get that in focus. I'm playing around with a stupidly expensive new camera at the moment, so I thought I'd sell them, and then they didn't sell for a bit, and I kept looking at them and I started getting ideas. Then other stuff started to become available, and it just became too good to not grow the army. In fact, I've got so much bloody chaos stuff, I'm still selling the other bits that I don't need. Oh god, this hobby enhancement describes itself as the most richly flavoured of all Scottish whiskies, and if you like drinking an ashtray, they're probably right. Right, so most of this stuff is the current edition of plastics, and we have a bunch of flamers there. I'll zoom in on that, and some more in the boxes. We've got a bunch of plastic horrors, and we have 8 sky sharks, which is a little bit less than I really want. I might see if I can muster up another one from somewhere. And so that's all the current edition plastics, with the exception of the Herald. This chap on his old school disc. This guy I think is 6th edition metals. It's really when the metals hit their high point before it all started being replaced by, well, crap cast and then plastics. I don't mind the plastic character models, to be honest, they're pretty good, but there is something about the premium metal. So there's this guy, and then there's 45 odd of these horrid little fuckers, pink horrors. I do like a metal army, and I'm not shy of mixing and matching the metal and plastic, so that'll go nicely. Funny thing about the metal horrors is that they don't have Games Workshop engraved in the base, which means they're either extremely old Games Workshop or they might not be Games Workshop. And I did look at a Citadel catalogue, and I couldn't for the life of me find the exact same sculpts as what I have here. So that has me thinking these are either Marauder, which is actually an official Games Workshop brand, as well as Citadel, or they're some sort of aftermarket, which is to say possibly counterfeit or something. I'm not entirely sure what, but I'm going to work on the basis that they're close enough to being genuine Games Workshop that I can field them, and if anyone argues, I'll just say, look, I've got a fucking kilo of metal here, you bloody well going to let me field them. And this chap needs some work on his base. That's why he's been propped up with dice, so he doesn't fall over and embarrass himself in front of the rest. Much like my Khorne demons, I've stuck to what you might describe as the classic units. I mean, some of the stuff like the Flamers and Sky Sharks, they're really, when you get down to it, they're a little bit 8th edition. But I've avoided things like chariots and, oh god, I don't know, whatever the hell else they've got in the list. I've really gone for core. Fundamentally, the basics. It's the way I like to do it. I'm a little bit old school when it comes to army selection. I know there's lots of lovely newfangled stuff, but I've been at this hobby for a very long time, and when I think back to the stuff I really wanted, I really wanted it a long time ago. And back then they didn't have things like Hell Cannon and Khorne chariots or thrones on wheels, whatever the hell they're calling the thing. So yeah, the things I really want and I'm really going to invest time in tend to be classic. Some of this stuff is on round bases, but I have enough 25mm square bases to rebase all of these modern era plastics. It's going to be a bit more of a challenge for the Flamers. I've got to work out what size bases they're even supposed to be on. 40mm maybe? I'm going to have a look. And of course the Sky Sharks, I'm pretty sure they'll be on 40mm bases. And I've got some weird flying bases on them at the moment. So I'm going to have to custom build 20 odd 40mm bases by the look of things. And in the midst of all of this, we have, get the focus in the right direction, some random plastic stuff. These are actually Flamers, which are not in a box, they just came as loose plastics. And I'm not sure what this is. This is another sprue. I suspect that it's actually part of a special character who's just missing his legs, I think. Or a leg. Maybe half a body, who knows. But there's bits of that guy missing. It just came as spare stuff. So what I'll end up doing, I reckon, is using some of those spare sprue bits for standard bearers to go with the metal, because they don't have standards of their own. And then I'll rummage through some bits boxes I've got to see if I can find anything to try and customize the metals into more command units, really. I like to have full command with most of my units. As for the paint, the old world is coming out in a few months, and the objective is to have this army pretty much done before that happens. So I'm going to have to learn how to speed paint. Now I've seen people use inks. Oop. I've seen people use inks. Not very good at inks myself. I tend to just use things as a wash and then paint over it to work the highlights up. So for me, it's always been something to just darken up the crevices. But some people will get a plain white base or even an off-white base and use inks to do up some really lovely color combinations. So I'm going to have a go. It's a challenge I've not tried. So I'm going to work on some of the, let's just say, less well presented chappies, just for practice, because they're really not going to make the grade unless I go to quite a bit of work on them. So I have practice with them, and the plan is to undercoat white, then use a white spray base coat out of the airbrush, assuming that I've cleaned it adequately and it still fucking works. And then over that crisp white base, I'm going to go to town with inks and washes and Probably do majority pink on the pink horrors, and then do some patches in blue to show where battle injuries are accruing, and some of them are devolving into blue horrors. A little bit of yellow here and there as a army highlight colour, because it really needs, it's going to need that colour to be broken up a little bit, otherwise it'll get very, very monotonous. But if I don't go too hardcore, I'll be able to do maybe 2 layers of inks on the bits I want dark. 1 layer of ink will probably let a lot of white show through, so we should get a lot of definition. And I'll road test what washes look like compared to the inks of different companies. So I think if you just slap the contrast paint all over it, you're going to end up with a slightly more bland finish than what I'm looking for. And I might muck around with some black ink as well, because maybe if you put black ink over the top, that'll create darker shades, and then if you do a coloured ink over the top of that, then you may have more definition. I'm just going to fuck around with it and see what I can do. One thing I will point out is that when it comes to doing all the claws and fingernails and teeth and everything else on these things, I am going to change up what I normally do. I normally do this 4-colour job. Let's get that fella in shot. He's got plenty of fangs poking out the front of him. Normally I do like a dark brown, then streaks of lighter brown, then streaks of white, then a Ogren wash, whatever the hell they're calling it these days, over the top of that, and then I'd like clean up the Ogren wash with the tip, and maybe even touch it up with a little bit of white, and I do that in every fucking Khorne, major claw, big bloody tooth across the Khorne army, all the monsters in the Dark Elf army. Did it on the bows and the dragon bits in the Wood Elf army. Getting a bit tired of that, and it takes a while. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint the claws, teeth, etc. in black, and I'm just going to highlight it with very, very thin lines of edge highlighting of plain white. Now, if we can be careful about it, that'll be reasonably quick. And that should help the speed painting along, and it will give it a totally different look to what I've been doing on the last few armies. Now, if I'm lucky and my plan survives contact with reality, and we know how often that happens, then the most time-consuming bit will be the bases, which I'll probably do the same as I've done every other base, because it will blend in with that lovely table hue, like all my other armies, more or less. And I don't use that same basing on the buildings, the forests, etc., etc. So much like the way the Dark Elves went after the first few units, and like the other stuff I'm doing, like my Napoleonic Prussians that I'm batch painting at the moment, the goal is to get a table-ready, good enough paint job done across the entire army in time to use it for the old world, and not languish with a few pretty pieces here and there, but otherwise largely unfinished until I hit retirement. Every other Warhammer Fantasy Battle army I've done took years. So I did multiple layers on every fucking square millimeter of the things, whether it necessarily looks like that at the end or not. This one will take months, even if I have to use some kind of chaos artifact to manipulate time, or otherwise gaslight the audience and pretend it didn't take as long as it really did. Anyway, that's it. That's the start of this one. I promise it will be less episodes long than the Dark Elf saga. Anyway, comment if you have any advice on how to make this army work, the art of splashing about ink. Hit like, subscribe, share with your friends, anything that helps get a bit of attention to the channel, because we got over 520 people looking at this thing, which is lovely. So thank you all of you lot who have taken the time to press the bell button. But for now, I've got a bit of work ahead of me cleaning these buggers up, and I'm not entirely sure of the whiskey, so it is time to call it a night.